We're back now for the last chapter of Tucket's Ride by Gary Paulson, chapter 12. If you've enjoyed these readings, let me know. Send me a message, put a comment on the YouTube thingy here, or whatever. Here we go, chapter 12. In spite of what he had said, Francis made Lottie and Billy sleep, or at least try to. The idea of escaping with Grimes made him think of the situation and what they were up against. He could not forget the ride here, the endlessness of it, the way the men kept on going and never quit. How they could get away from these same men posed a problem that Francis needed to think about. Grimes might be able to get something up, but that didn't mean it would succeed. If the Comancheros chased as hard as they ran, it would be next to impossible to get away with Lottie and Billy. The mare was done, and the mule was not much better, which meant they would have to take different horses from the Comanchero herd. What if they didn't get good stock? What if they didn't get away? What would the Comancheros do to them if they tried to run and failed? What if? He finally stopped thinking about it. There were too many variables to make any kind of prediction, so much that could go wrong. It came down to a very simple, possibly deadly problem. 1, they couldn't stay and get traded to the Comanches. 2, the Comancheros wouldn't let them go voluntarily. 3, they had to run. Whether they made it or not, they still had to run, had to try, and that was that. Lottie and Billy finally slept. The temperature had warmed slightly, and they seemed comfortable enough in their blanket pullovers. Francis sat by the wall and watched the celebration through the bushy wall of the hut. Grimes had broken open the top of a small keg of whiskey. He dipped in 10 cups, T-I-N, 10 like metal, 10 cups in the brew and handed them to the men around the fire, and in a very short time they were all as drunk as Francis had ever seen, with the possible exception of the army commandant. They did not stop the party because they were drunk, but kept on until the barrel was empty. Then Mr. Grimes started trading. He pointed at the hut where the children were and shook his head and waved his hands. He didn't want the children. He wanted gold. He would trade for gold, and soon, lubricated by the whiskey, the Comancheros started bringing out gold they had gotten from the Comanche trading, and by the time they were all nearly drunk enough to pass out, Grimes had sold all his goods and had a small sack of gold coins. He had been drinking with the men, taking the cup on each pass. Could Grimes help them escape if he was drunk? The mountain man was soon weaving and wobbling as much as the Comancheros, and when most of the men left and returned to their huts, falling all over themselves, Grimes was as drunk as the rest. He fell back on his blanket by the fire, rolled up, and passed out. The few remaining Comancheros tried to scoop more whiskey out of the empty keg and then drifted off. And that, Francis thought, watching it all, was that. So much for running. He turned away and settled his back against the side of the hut, his mind full of bitter thoughts. How could it have been any different? Grimes was still Grimes, a rough man in the company of other rough men. Why would he risk it all just to save 3 kids, one of whom he didn't even like? Francis let his eyes close, opened them, and checked Grimes once more. When he saw that the mountain man was still unconscious, he closed them again, not to sleep, he thought, just to rest and be ready for what would come the next day. Just a moment. Were you going to sleep all night, Mr. Tucket? Francis opened his eyes slowly to find Grimes standing in front of him in the darkness of the hut. I thought you were drunk, and I must have fallen asleep. I was letting on. It takes a heap to make me drunk, even when I'm drinking, and I wasn't drinking. And you were supposed to be ready. I am. Get the sprites up. That's what he's calling the kids, the sprites. Get the sprites up. We have to move now. And Grimes disappeared into the darkness. Francis shook Lottie and Billy. Lottie snapped awake instantly, but Billy took a moment. Come on, there's no time to waste. You take my hand and hang on to Billy's with your other one. We don't want to get separated in the dark. Do exactly as I tell you and be quiet. Francis moved out of the hut. Grimes hadn't said where he was going because he hadn't needed to. They needed horses, and that meant the horse herd at the edge of the encampment. Francis dragged the 2 children at a dead run. Grimes was already there with his 3 horses. One was saddled, and the other 2 had pack saddles on them. He whispered, You'll have to ride the pack horses. Most of their stock seems awful run down. They rode hard getting here. They haven't rested enough yet. Francis thought briefly of the mare and the mule. He hated to leave them, but they hadn't recovered enough. No more talk. We have to ride. Throw the pups up on one horse, and you take the other. When Francis got close to the pack horses, he saw that they had some gear tied to their saddles. His rifle was there, along with his powder horn and possibles. You got my gun. Grimes snorted. I remembered it from before. Thought you might need it. The man who had it was so drunk he won't know it's gone for a week. They moved through the horse herd, leading their mounts, Francis pulling the horse with Lottie and Billy on top. For a time it seemed that they would make it. They had cleared the herd and were 20 paces into dark prairie when a dog started barking. Francis didn't know what set it off, but as soon as it barked, another joined it, and soon every dog in the village was yelping. It woke some of the drunk comancheros, who yelled at the dogs. Grime had stopped, frozen, waiting for the clamor to subside. It nearly did. But one of the comancheros was sick and wandered to the edge of the village to throw up no more than 30 feet from the little group. At first he didn't see them. He finished his business and was turning away when something caught his eye, a flash of metal in the moonlight, the dark mass of a horse against the starry sky. Something. "Que?" That's Spanish for what? He leaned forward, peering into the dark, and still almost didn't see them. Then Billy sneezed. "Hoo!" It sounded like a whistle, a big owl hooting, but it got the job done. Drunk or not, the camp lived on the edge of danger every moment, and they came awake instantly with the alarm. The man who had yelled didn't have a gun, but he had a belt knife. He pulled it and went for Grimes. The mountain man stepped to the side and clubbed him down with his rifle, then swung into the saddle. "We're for it now. Let's go." And he wheeled and vanished into the darkness. Francis threw his leg up over the pack horse and followed, kicking the horse into speed, although he didn't need to. The two pack horses were accustomed to following Grimes, and they slammed out at a dead run. It was hard to stay astride. The pack saddle was covered with a piece of folded, empty canvas, but it didn't have stirrups. Soon they were at a wild lope through the darkness over broken ground, and Francis had dropped the rope leading to the second pack horse. He wanted to check on Lottie and Billy, but couldn't turn. He yelled back, "Are you with me?" "With you? We're ahead of you." And they were. The pack horses had followed Grimes and his mount when the mountain man had taken off. The children's horse was faster than Francis's. It was a miracle they didn't fall. Grimes kept them at a hard run for well over an hour until the horses were snorting and blowing before he slowed them to a walk to catch their wind. They had caught up to him, and Grimes spoke while he rode. "We don't have much time before they catch us." "With that ride?" Francis felt his horse heaving, trying to suck air. "Don't forget who they are. We have the night helping us. They'll track slow and dark, and if we keep moving, we might stretch it a bit, but they'll come on hard, and we won't have much time." "What can we do?" Lottie's face looked white in the darkness. Grimes was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I figure we've come 12, 14 miles. I know where we are. The river canyon lies just north of here, 2 to 3 miles, maybe 4. There's water and game there. You'll be able to hide and get food." "What are you saying here?" Francis cut in. "You're going to leave us?" Grimes nodded. "It's the only way. They're after 3 horses. If you get off here and walk north, and I keep moving west with the pack horses, they'll come after me. You cover your tracks, and they won't see them in the dark. With light stock and no pups, I can keep ahead of them for days, maybe forever. They'll think you're with me, and it will give you time to get away north, get back to help." "You're deserting us," Lottie said. Of all the cold things to do, Francis had thought the same thing at first, but now he shook his head. "He's right, Lottie. If we stay with him, we'll be slower, and they'll catch us. It's the only way we have a chance. We have to separate." But still, something held him, and he thought a moment about it before he realized what it was. He didn't want to leave the mountain man. At one time, he had never wanted to see Grimes again, but now he realized he had missed Grimes a great deal. "I don't want to leave you," he said, and realized how it sounded soft, silly. I know what you mean," Grimes said, his voice low. "It was right good to see you again, too, although I wish we could meet under some easier conditions. I'd like to ride with you a while myself, but this is the only way." "I know. And if we waste time jawing and palavering, they're going to ride up on us." "I know. So dismount and go." "Where are you going? Maybe we can meet up again." Francis swung off and held the second pack horse while the children jumped down, took his rifle and possible sack, then handed the 2 lead ropes to Grimes. "Straight west until I lose them, and then I'll start swinging north. I'll stay where it's warm for the winter because my bones are old and I don't like cold like I once did. Look for me there, where it's warm. Cover your tracks as you head north and keep your hair on and your powder dry." As he was gone before Francis could think, I should have thanked him. "I don't like him," Lottie said as he disappeared in the darkness. "I didn't for a while, but I'd changed. He grows on you. Come on, we don't have time to talk." As it happened, they had less time than Francis had thought. He made the 2 children walk ahead of him in single file, following them closely. He broke off a small branch of mesquite and brushed over their tracks as best he could in the dark as they moved. And not more than 10 minutes, he heard hooves coming hard. "Stop now," he whispered, seeing the children's faces in the dark, Lottie white and round. He added, "Turn away from the sound, lie down, and not a sound now, not a sound at all." He actually saw the riders pass. It was too dark to count them, more than 10, maybe 15 men, but they were pushing their horses, and they thundered past the children not 60 yards away without seeing them. They'll catch Grimes, he thought, watching them fade into the night. Moving that fast, they'll come up on him before morning. He has just the one gun, and I should have stayed with him. We'd have taken 2 of them, maybe 4 before they took us. Then he shook his head, remembering who Grimes was, what he'd done, how tough he was. He took some catching. If he was caught, he would take some holding. He smiled then and thought Grimes must have been something with 2 arms, hard as he was with only one. "I hope I see him again. Come on," he whispered to the children, starting then moving north again. "We've got some ground to cover." That was the end of that story. Okay, so there's another story, and I'll pick it up next time, and it's called Tucket's Gold, and that's what we'll pick up next time. Remember, give me a comment or something to let me know you're watching. See ya. Bye.